Chosen ones, let me ask you something real. Have you ever found yourself wondering why your sex drive, once so strong, has quietly faded into the background? Why do the desires that once stirred your flesh now feel strangely distant, like echoes from another life? You're not broken. You're not malfunctioning. And no, beloved, this is not a mistake. What you're experiencing is sacred. It's divine. It's God stepping into your story in a way that defies logic but speaks directly to your spirit. You see, when you're truly chosen, God doesn't just elevate your life. He refines it. He begins to remove the distractions, the urges, and even the impulses that once ruled you, not to shame you, but to shape you for greater purpose. The quieting of your sexual appetite isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's a spiritual detox, a holy pruning. And whether you realize it or not, it's one of the clearest signs that you're being set apart for something extraordinary. So before we explore the 9 divine reasons why your sex drive may have been taken away, I want to thank every soul who's supported this mission, whether through your presence, your prayers, or even through super thanks. Your love fuels this message, and I don't take a single one of you for granted. If you've been led here today, if your spirit knows this message carries divine timing, don't scroll past it. Drop 777 in the comments right now. A number of spiritual completion and alignment. When you do, you're declaring to heaven and earth, I'm ready. I understand. I trust the process. Now take a deep breath, open your heart and lean in, because what we're about to uncover might just explain a shift in you that you've silently wrestled with for years. Let's begin. God's chosen ones, 9 reasons why God takes away your sex drive. It's not a mistake. One, spiritual awakening requires energy reallocation. As one of God's chosen, you must understand, this is not simply about a change in your physical urges. This is the shifting of your entire inner universe. Sexual energy is more than a human instinct. It is creative fire, the very pulse of divine intention. It is the same force that caused galaxies to swirl into being, the same breath that parted the Red Sea, the same current that carries both desire and destiny. In the language of sacred science, this is libido, not just sexual drive, but the fundamental energy that animates all passion, creativity, and spiritual will. Why is it being pulled inward now? Because just as a mighty oak tree pauses its growth in winter to push life force deep into its roots, you too are entering a season of internal fortification. Could it be that the silence in your flesh is actually the voice of God getting louder in your soul? When God reclaims this energy, it is not subtraction, it is sanctification. You are being realigned with heaven's frequencies, recalibrated to receive instruction, insight, and inspiration that the noise of lust once drowned out. Jesus' time in the wilderness, Matthew 4:1-11, where the absence of physical gratification became the platform for supernatural authority. He fasted, resisted temptation, and emerged with clarity of mission. Likewise, your body's quieting is not a malfunction. It's a message. It's God's hand steering your energy away from what satisfies temporarily toward what edifies eternally. Have you noticed how the butterfly disappears from view before it can soar? Inside its cocoon, it literally dissolves into cellular chaos before reconstructing into beauty. Your current transformation may feel like disorientation, but what if it's holy reconstruction? Paul wrote in Romans 12:2, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." When the desires of the flesh subside, the inner man is given room to breathe, to rise, and to remember the call. You are not being weakened, you are being sharpened. The energy once spent in external longing is now fueling your spiritual neuroplasticity, the reshaping of thoughts, habits, and spiritual pathways. An everyday example: Lydia, a midwife in her 40s, once struggled with compulsive sexual relationships that left her emotionally empty. But when her sex drive began to wane, she didn't panic. She paused. She began painting again, praying more, volunteering with single mothers. Her body became quiet, but her spirit became loud. Her silence birthed color, compassion, and courage. Does her story sound like your current season? But not all choose the sacred path. In Greek mythology, Narcissus couldn't redirect his energy inward, and instead he drowned in his own reflection. In real life, Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein pursued every carnal urge until it devoured his influence and dignity. When energy is not surrendered to God, it becomes a snare, turning drive into destruction. Energy is holy. Unsubmitted, it becomes dangerous. Psalm 51:10 cries, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." That's what this moment is, a renewal. And if you feel isolated right now, like a bear in hibernation, remember, hibernation is not death. It is the storing of power for a coming season of force and movement. What if the absence of desire is not absence at all, but God's strategy to preserve the essence of your soul? What if your no today is the seed of a kingdom yes tomorrow? As you walk through this sacred reallocation, know this: you are not being emptied, you are being entrusted. And what is being entrusted to you is too holy to be wasted in mere appetite. Let God finish the work. Your next chapter requires all of you focus. You focused, fortified, and free. And yet, chosen one, in this sacred reallocation, you may feel as though a part of you has gone missing. But in reality, something far greater is being found. You are not losing your essence. You are reclaiming your sovereignty. Just as the moon waxes and wanes, yet never ceases to shine, your passion is not dying. It is being purified. When God chooses to quiet your body, it's because He intends to amplify your spirit. The entropy of your former urges is giving way to divine order. And in this stillness, your soul can finally hear what noise once buried. You may ask, why now? Why this season? Why me? Because you are entering a divine assignment that requires more than enthusiasm. It requires consecration. You cannot pour living water into a vessel still leaking at the seams. God is sealing the fractures in your heart. He is suturing the spiritual wounds that lust once kept open. The very desire that once enslaved you is now being transformed into discernment, into depth, into prophetic clarity. Your loss is sacred mathematics, subtraction that equals multiplication. Just like a volcano lies dormant for decades, storing pressure until one day it reshapes the entire landscape with a single eruption, your suppressed desire is not dead. It is being concentrated for breakthrough. God is calling you not to resist the reallocation, but to partner with it. To let Him redirect the current of your energy toward a life of design, not desire. Remember what Isaiah 40:31 says, "But those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not grow weary. They shall walk and not faint." That's what's happening now. You are not stagnant. You are being given eagle's wings. Do you remember Ruth? After losing her husband, she could have easily fallen into despair or distraction, but instead she stayed with Naomi, focused on purpose, and God redirected her entire lineage. Through her came the bloodline of Jesus. Ruth 4:13 through 22. Her restraint was rewarded with divine legacy. Your quiet season is not the end of your story. It is the soil from which eternal fruit will bloom. Corey, a 29-year-old engineer, recently shared his story. After years of wrestling with pornography and meaningless hookups, he found himself suddenly numb to the cravings. At first he feared he was broken, but as weeks passed he realized he was dreaming more vividly, writing with depth, worshipping without distraction. That shift in desire became the birth of his spiritual renaissance. His life began to reflect the words of Philippians 2:13, "For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose." But the consequences of resisting this transformation can be devastating. King Solomon, once the wisest man to ever live, allowed his insatiable appetite for women to turn his heart from God. 1 Kings 11:4 warns, "As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God." His downfall wasn't due to lack of knowledge, but lack of surrender. Don't allow your gift to become your grave. What God is removing is what could ruin you if left unchecked. Have you wondered why your creativity feels more potent lately? Why your sensitivity to people's emotions, your spiritual discernment, your hunger for truth, all seem heightened? It's because God has taken the raw material of your desire and is reforging it into spiritual authority. Like fire turned into light, like wind turned into direction, your energy is evolving into something eternal. In neuroscience, this process is known as transmutation, the redirecting of libidinal energy from primal urges into higher purpose. Napoleon Hill wrote in Think and Grow Rich, "Sex desire is the most powerful of human desires. When harnessed, it may be transmuted into a powerful force through which men may climb to the status of a genius. While the world reduces sex to a commodity, God elevates it into covenant. And when he removes it temporarily, it's not to shame you, it's to sanctify you for greatness. And as Job declared through the ashes of his suffering, he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold." Job 23:10. You are not being denied, you are being refined, like gold in fire, like wine in stillness, like purpose in silence. So don't fear this pause in your desire. Embrace it. It is evidence that heaven is closer than it has ever been. You are walking through the sacred veil, stepping beyond survival and into significance. Your story is no longer about reaction, it is about resurrection. And when the time comes, when God deems it so, your desire will return, not as temptation, but as tool, not as noise, but as power. Because when God reclaims something from his chosen, he only does so to replace it with something infinitely more glorious. 2. Protection from soul ties and spiritual contamination. You, chosen one, may not always understand why your physical cravings seem to vanish without warning, why what once felt urgent now feels irrelevant. But heaven always sees what your eyes cannot. You are being protected, not from pleasure, but from pollution, from unseen forces that cling to your soul like shadows on light. Physical intimacy is never just about bodies. It is the weaving of spirits, the mingling of essence, the unseen covenant between energies. What science would classify as energetic resonance, Scripture affirms as spiritual union, and every union leaves an imprint. As the ocean pulls back before a storm, your longing is withdrawing to make space for clarity. Not everyone you touch with your body deserves access to your spirit. When two become one in the flesh, as described in Genesis 2:24, the soul follows. But what happens when the other soul carries rage, grief, bitterness, or generational chains? Whether you feel it or not, part of that burden transfers. Like pollen carried on the wind, you breathe in what you cannot see, and slowly your peace becomes murky. Your discernment dulls, your dreams blur. Have you ever felt strangely heavy after being with someone, as if your joy was leaking. That is not a coincidence. That is spiritual contamination. The person may have smiled, touched you gently, even spoken sweetly, but their spirit may have been drenched in wounds that were never healed, doors that were never closed. And through the sacred transaction of intimacy, they deposited fragments of themselves into your spiritual field. Proverbs 4:23 urges, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." And how can you guard your heart while leaving the gate of your body open to those not assigned by heaven? God sees the danger behind the disguise. He knows that a beautiful face can house a chaotic spirit, that a charming voice can carry ancient curses. Imagine a bee drawn to a flower laced with poison. It lands in trust, but flies away infected. Many chosen ones have walked unknowingly into beds of spiritual death. That is why God, in His mercy, dulls your desire. It's not rejection, it's a redirect. He is building a wall around your garden until it is time for it to bloom under righteous hands. The story of Dinah in Genesis 34, who was taken by Shechem. Though the Bible records no consent, the consequences were catastrophic, not just for her, but for entire families. The disruption of her purity caused vengeance, bloodshed, and sorrow. Intimacy misaligned carries echoes far beyond the moment. It opens portals that few know how to close. Have you noticed how after certain relationships your focus faltered, your energy dipped, your appetite for prayer or purpose vanished? That is the residue of a soul tie, a tie not ordained but allowed. And when the tie is deep enough, it takes spiritual surgery to remove. Take Brielle, a 27-year-old worship leader who once dated a man she described as charismatic, intense, and spiritual. But after sleeping with him, she began to feel disoriented. Her music dried up. Her prayers became cold. She later discovered he was practicing occult rituals in secret. His darkness entered her through what seemed like passion and left her spirit paralyzed for months. But once she repented and went through deliverance, her anointing returned stronger than ever. Contrast that with Jezebel, the manipulative queen in 1 Kings 21, whose seduction and spiritual corruption infected even prophets. Her power wasn't just political, it was energetic, seductive, destructive. Her presence alone was enough to derail entire destinies. Some people carry atmospheres that twist your path. This is why God says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers." 2 Corinthians 6:14. It is not judgment, it is survival. Chosen one, your destiny is far too precious to be entangled with contamination. Your frequency is rising. You cannot afford to be tethered to souls that operate on lower vibrations. Like the eagle, you are not meant to mate with pigeons. Eagles soar alone until they find one worthy of their flight. Do you feel the difference in you lately? How silence feels more sacred than touch? How does solitude feel safer than intimacy? That is God recalibrating your spiritual boundaries. He is removing the appetite so that He can remove the access. This is not a rejection of love, it is a protection of light. Psalm 91:3 reminds us, "Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence." Soul ties are snares. Intimacy without alignment is pestilence to your spiritual immune system. You are being preserved, not because you are weak, but because your next chapter demands a clean and consecrated vessel. So don't mourn the loss of craving. Celebrate the protection of your crown. Don't chase what God has closed. Don't regret what heaven has restrained. You are not being withheld. You are being washed, watched over, and made ready. This is divine mercy in disguise, a holy firewall around your anointing. Third, preparation for divine relationships. There comes a moment on your spiritual ascent, chosen one, when God no longer allows you to settle for what simply feels good. because He is preparing you for what is truly good. The quieting of your sex drive is not a malfunction of your biology, but a sacred calibration of your spirit. It is a temporary hush over your physical cravings, so that your soul can begin to recognize what it truly needs. This is not punishment, it is preparation. You are being made ready for a love that does not merely touch skin, but transforms destinies. In the wilderness of silence, God is clearing the fog of superficial attraction, the kind that once drew you into cycles of longing without fulfillment. Think of how the wild rose grows in silence before it blooms in glory. You are entering that quiet growth. The lust that once led you is being replaced by discernment, by wisdom, by a longing not for stimulation, but for sacred union. Can you feel the shift from needing to be wanted to desiring to be seen in truth? Song of Songs 3:5 whispers, "Do not awaken love until it so desires." And what you're feeling now is God keeping that love sacred, asleep for a season, because your spirit is not being readied for a mere partner, but for a divine counterpart. Someone whose spirit will harmonize with yours like the moon to the tide, whose presence will stir not just affection but alignment. But first, the cleansing must come. You cannot bring old scars, distorted expectations, and leftover soul debris into a holy bond. Have you noticed how certain thoughts and emotional attachments are surfacing again? Not to torment you, but to be finally released. This is the spiritual detoxification process, where the soul is purged of illusions so that only truth remains. Remember Rebekah in Genesis 24, a woman of purity and kindness, found not through striving, but by divine appointment. She met Isaac not through seduction, but through servanthood and trust. Their union wasn't just romantic, it was prophetic. She watered his camels before she even knew his name. Your counterpart will recognize you not by what you offer physically, but by the anointing you carry when no one is watching. But let's ask honestly, how many people chase chemistry while neglecting compatibility of purpose? How many enter relationships based on touch, only to end up torn? God is preventing you from building on sand what He intends to root in rock. This delay is not denial, it's alignment. Take Jonah, a 32-year-old graphic designer who used to fall for intense relationships filled with passion but plagued by volatility. When his sex drive began to diminish, he panicked until he realized that for the first time he could see people clearly. He no longer mistook intensity for intimacy. He learned to choose with his spirit, not his hormones. Months later, he met Maya, a trauma counselor with whom he now co-leads a ministry for healing broken families. Their love was born in stillness and built in service. This kind of union requires emotional intelligence, spiritual maturity, and the psychological concept of individuation, becoming whole in oneself before merging with another. Your waiting season is your coming season, because divine relationships are not found. They are revealed through transformation. Contrast that with the story of Ananias and Sapphira in Acts 5, a couple who were physically united but spiritually divided. Their deceit cost them everything. Union without integrity is a trap, not a blessing. What appears beautiful on the outside but lacks spiritual substance will collapse under the weight of God's calling. Have you felt lately that your standards are rising? That shallow talk bores you, that fleeting chemistry no longer intoxicates you. It's because God is rewiring you for eternal compatibility. He is removing the noise so you can hear the voice. The voice that will one day call you bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, not out of need, but out of recognition. Psalm 37:4 says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." When your heart aligns with heaven, God doesn't just fulfill your desires, He reshapes them. And then He sends someone not just for comfort, but for kingdom collaboration. This is not the time to rush. This is the time to root. Like the sequoia tree that spends years underground before breaking through the soil, you are establishing spiritual depth that will support a union of holy magnitude. What is coming will be sacred, not shallow, fierce, not fleeting, transformational, not transactional. So don't mourn the loss of momentary desire. Celebrate the making of divine design. You are not being left behind, you are being set apart. And the one God sends will not awaken your lust. They will ignite your life's purpose. Together, your union will not only reflect heaven, it will advance it. But to receive a divine relationship, chosen one, your soul must first become a fertile ground, not of desperation, but of devotion. That's why God isolates you before He aligns you. He silences the craving for touch so He can awaken the hunger for truth. You are not meant to mirror the world's standards, chasing compatibility through algorithms or attraction. You are being shaped to embody covenant, the kind of bond that is written in spirit long before it's ever spoken in words. Have you ever seen two vines that grow toward each other, not because they were forced, but because the sun drew them in the same direction? That is how divine love works, not by striving, but by alignment. It's not about who excites your senses, but who expands your calling. This kind of connection cannot be built while you're still tethered to old wounds or measuring intimacy by attention spans. That is why God withdraws the flesh, so you can finally see what's been blinding your spirit. Isaiah 62:5 says, "As a bridegroom rejoices over his bride, so will your God rejoice over you." Notice, He rejoices over you, not your performance, not your perfection, but your presence. And until you can receive that kind of love from God first, you won't recognize it in anyone else. Many people crave a partner, but haven't yet become partners to themselves. They seek wholeness in someone else while ignoring the call to wholeness within. Jasmine, a 41-year-old physician, once said, "I thought my celibacy was a dry season, but looking back, it was the season I bloomed the most. I became the woman I used to beg others to see in me." Her silence birthed self-respect. Her abstinence became a revelation. And months later, she met someone who wasn't just impressed by her, he was sent for her. God does not send divine counterparts to fill your emptiness. He sends them to co-create legacy. That's why your delay is not a punishment, but a pruning. Just as Jesus said in John 15:2, "Every branch that bears fruit He prunes, that it may bear more fruit." If God is cutting away your urges, your distractions, even certain people, it's because He's making room for abundance. But do not be deceived. There will be counterfeits. The enemy knows how to send people who talk about God but walk in ego. People who look like purpose but leak manipulation. How will you know the difference? You'll feel it in your peace, because divine love doesn't agitate your spirit, it confirms it. It doesn't just give butterflies, it gives blueprints. Have you found yourself dreaming of building, serving, leading, creating, rather than merely being desired? That's because God is showing you that your heart is ready to love with purpose. Not to consume, but to co-labor. Not to possess, but to partner. The divine relationship coming your way is a spiritual yoking, where two callings intertwine and multiply heaven's agenda on earth. Ecclesiastes 4:12 declares, "A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken." This means your union will be braided with purpose, presence, and power. You, your divine counterpart, and the hand of God in between. And such a union cannot be rushed. It must be revealed, then refined, then released. So if God has removed the urge, rejoice. It means He's building the foundation. He's writing a story too holy to be touched by haste. He's preparing you not for romance that entertains, but for a relationship that resurrects, the kind that reminds you who you are and whose you are. Because love from God doesn't just feel good, It transforms you, elevates you, and leads both souls home. 4. Your flesh must die for your spirit to rise. One of the deepest and most sacred revelations on your spiritual path as one of God's chosen is this: something in you must surrender so something greater in you can awaken. The fading of your sexual desires is not punishment. It is a sign of resurrection in progress. You are not losing your humanity. You are being reintroduced to your divinity. The flesh, in Scripture and in spirit, represents more than just the body. It is symbolic of the ego, the part of you that craves validation, control, lust, and short-lived satisfaction. These cravings may have once seemed natural, even justified, but weren't they also exhausting? Didn't they leave you emptier, not fuller? Can you recall how moments of indulgence often ended in spiritual silence, as though your soul had been shouted over? Galatians 5:17 says, "For the flesh desires what is contrary to the spirit, and the spirit what is contrary to the flesh." The war between flesh and spirit is not metaphor, it's your lived experience. But something miraculous is happening. Your old self is dissolving. What once led you now no longer moves you. That is spiritual evolution. Imagine the caterpillar that must digest itself entirely within the cocoon, breaking down all form, structure, and identity so it can become the butterfly. This is not decay. This is divine reconstruction. Your sexual desire fading is like the wings forming in silence. The cocoon may be tight, lonely, dark, but it's where the old self dies and the higher self is born. The Bible says in Romans 6:6, "Our old self was crucified with him, so that the body ruled by sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves to sin." You are no longer enslaved by urges that once dominated your decisions. This surrender of flesh is not weakness. It is sovereignty. You are reclaiming dominion over your mind, your time, and your spirit. But death is never easy. Sometimes the old cravings will knock like ghosts at midnight. You'll feel memories, temptations, even frustration. But what if those are just tests, not traps? What if they're the final whispers of a self that no longer fits who you're becoming? Kevin, a former R&B musician who lived in cycles of touring, women, and addiction, once described how, after a radical encounter with God, he lost all desire for sex. At first he feared he had lost himself, but soon he discovered something new. He began writing songs filled with healing, started preaching in prisons, and mentoring fatherless teens. His flesh died, and from its ashes, purpose rose. Contrast that with Samson, whose strength was legendary, but whose weakness for fleshly pleasure led to his downfall. In Judges 16:20, after sleeping with Delilah, he did not know that the Lord had left him. When you follow the flesh long enough, you risk forfeiting the presence of God. That is not a risk the chosen can afford. What is being removed from you is what once ruled you. You are not being numbed. You are being neutralized to lower temptations so you can be sensitive to higher truth. As your flesh loosens its grip, your spirit stretches its wings. You begin to perceive beyond what is seen, to feel beyond what is touched, to know beyond what is taught. This is spiritual ascension, the rewiring of your desires to match your divine design. Philippians 3:7-8 says, "But whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. I consider them garbage, that I may gain Christ." You're not losing sex. You're gaining selfhood, sovereignty, and sanctity. You're trading momentary heat for eternal light. Have you noticed how your prayer life deepens when the distractions fade? How fasting feels possible? How does worship feel cleaner? It's because your temple is being cleared. Just like Jesus drove out the money changers in John 2:15, God is driving out the noise in you to restore the sacred. The flesh cannot worship without mixing performance, but the spirit, it worships in truth. You are not meant to be controlled by impulse. You are being remade to carry power with purity. Like gold purified by fire, you are passing through refinement, not to be reduced, but to be revealed. This is the death of the surface, so the depth may rise. So when you feel the old hunger fade, don't panic. Praise. Something in you is being resurrected. The lower self is lying down so the higher self can stand up. You are not just surviving, you are ascending. Yet dying to the flesh, chosen one, is not a one-time moment. It is a daily shedding, a sacred unraveling. Like the serpent must shed its skin to grow, you too must release what no longer fits the version of you God is birthing. This is why some days you feel raw, exposed, in between identities. It's not confusing, it's a transition. Have you wondered why old habits suddenly repulse you? Why do certain conversations feel like noise? Why do past temptations seem to bounce off your spirit like water off stone? It's because you're stepping into your divine frequency, and what once entertained you now entangles you. God is shifting the axis of your inner world away from stimulation toward sanctification. 2 Corinthians 4:16 reminds you, though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. That is the mystery of your journey. What appears like loss on the outside is a holy renovation on the inside. The outer man is decreasing so the inner man may rise in full stature. Take nature, for example. Before spring bursts forth in bloom, winter must strip the earth bare. Trees stand leafless, lifeless, yet beneath the frost, the roots grow deeper. In that same way, your current season may seem silent, even barren. But what if this is where your spiritual roots are digging into eternal soil? Matthew, a 36-year-old ex-bodybuilder turned missionary, once said, "When my libido began to fade, I thought God had broken me, but it was actually Him building me for something eternal. I stopped living from the waist down and started living from the soul up." Today, he runs a trauma recovery camp for young men struggling with addiction to pornography, and he's never felt more masculine, more purposeful, or more whole. Let that sink in. You are not being emptied, you are being equipped. And sometimes the best way to fill a vessel is to first pour it out. The world teaches you to chase pleasure. Heaven teaches you to become a vessel of presence. These are two different energies, and only one leads to transformation. Have you noticed how your thoughts feel more spacious now? How has clarity replaced confusion? That's because sexual energy, when not released outward, becomes creative fire within. The same energy that once chased desire can now write books, build businesses, compose music, intercede for nations. This is what mystics and sages called transmutation, turning carnal energy into spiritual currency. Jesus said in Luke 9:23, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." This is your cross, not a burden of shame, but a bridge to resurrection. The death of the flesh is not humiliation, it is initiation. You are dying to what is temporary, so you may rise into what is timeless. And yes, this journey can feel lonely, but even Jesus withdrew into the wilderness to fast, to be tested, and to silence the flesh. Matthew 4:1-11. He did not come out weaker, he came out walking in power. So will you. You are not becoming less. You are becoming lightweight enough to ascend. You are shedding density, releasing what weighs you down, making room for God's breath to fill you like wind in the sails of a ship. So when you feel the ache, the absence, the awkward silence in your desires, pause. Give thanks. You are being set apart. You are becoming a temple not just of discipline but of divine fire. And soon, what rises in you will not be a mere emotion, it will be authority. 5. Detoxing from addiction and distractions. Let's not sugarcoat it, chosen one. This world is flooded with a seductive current of overstimulation. Sexualized images lurk in every scroll, every screen, every second. Billboards, music videos, jokes in casual conversations. They are not just harmless expressions of modern culture. They are carefully engineered distractions, spiritual viruses designed to compromise your internal operating system. But here's the deeper truth. What you're experiencing now, the diminishing of your sex drive, is not dysfunction. It is detoxification. God, in His mercy, is pulling you out of the system. Your cravings are being silenced, not to rob you of joy, but to return your soul to freedom. Because when sexual energy is hijacked by the world, it stops being sacred and starts being enslaved. Like a river diverted from its source, it floods the wrong places and destroys what it was meant to nurture. Ephesians 4:22 tells you to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires. This detoxing process you're going through is spiritual surgery. And like any healing, it requires stillness, patience, and surrender. What once excited you now exhausts you. What once held power over you now feels powerless. That's not your weakness. That's God's reprogramming at work. Have you ever wondered why you no longer feel drawn to certain types of media? Why do your fingers hover over old search terms, but your spirit says, no more? It's because heaven has started closing the doors you once kicked open. You're no longer being fed by dopamine. You're being nourished by discernment. In neuroscience, this is called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on repeated thought and behavior. When God reduces your urges, He's giving your brain a chance to break old loops, dismantle false reward systems, and build new neurological pathways aligned with purpose. Your brain isn't malfunctioning, it's finally healing. Elijah, a 28-year-old marketing executive who once admitted he couldn't go a day without adult content. He described his addiction as a comforting prison, but after fasting and spiritual counseling, his desires began to shift. It's like I can breathe again, he said. Like my mind isn't fogged over anymore. He later launched a support group that now helps hundreds of young men walk into freedom. But on the flip side, remember King Solomon. Despite his divine wisdom, he allowed lust and distraction to rule his later years. 1 Kings 11:4 says, as Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord. His downfall didn't come from weakness of knowledge. It came from the failure to guard his focus. Distraction is just as dangerous as destruction. So ask yourself, what's been stealing your gaze? What tiny temptations have kept you spinning in cycles? Could it be that God, in His grace, is unplugging you from the matrix? Not just so you'll abstain, but so you'll finally awaken. Isaiah 30:15 says, in quietness and trust is your strength. That's where you are now, in the quiet space where temptations lose volume and truth gets louder. Your sexual silence is a spiritual stillness, where the noise of addiction is replaced by the whisper of destiny. Like the forest that must be burned for new life to emerge, your old patterns are being scorched by divine fire. This fire is not to harm you, it's to cleanse the soil of your soul. You are not being punished. You are being purified. You are not being numbed. You are being made new. Psalm 101 verse 3 says, I will set no vile thing before my eyes. You are beginning to live this. You're learning that freedom is not just about what you run from, it's about what you are finally able to run toward. Clarity, creativity, communion with God, and soon you'll notice it. Your energy returning, your dreams intensifying, your focus sharpening. What once distracted you now disgusts you. What once enslaved you now empowers you. This is what it feels like to be detoxed, not just in body, but in frequency. You're not just getting clean, you're getting clear. And in this clarity, you will hear God's voice in ways you never imagined. No more clouded lenses, no more divided attention. Just you, awakened, aligned, and anchored in purpose. But detoxing isn't just the absence of addiction, it's the painful beauty of withdrawal. And let's be honest, chosen one, withdrawal isn't glamorous. It's not always holy music and clear skies. Sometimes it feels like thunder inside your bones. The same way a tree bends in a storm before it strengthens at the root, you too may feel fragile right now. But that doesn't mean you're falling apart. It means your soul is being rewired for resilience. The world doesn't just teach addiction, it normalizes it. From the dopamine loops of social media to the constant barrage of sensual temptation, it keeps you hooked on pleasure to keep you numb to purpose. But you weren't created to be numb. You were created to feel with intention, to channel your energy not toward impulse, but into impact. Have you noticed that in this season, your cravings for false intimacy have been replaced by a craving for truth? That's not by accident. That's spiritual immunity forming in your soul. Like antibodies fighting off old viruses, your spirit is rejecting what no longer aligns with your new nature. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That's what's happening now. Not just behavior modification, but mind renewal. God is not only detoxing your body, He's restoring your spiritual appetite. And in that restoration, you will start to crave what feeds your future, not just what stimulates your senses. Talia, a 34-year-old fashion influencer, spent years monetizing her appearance. She once confessed that every outfit she wore was designed to attract attention, not express purpose. But after a sudden drop in her sex drive and a long season of emotional emptiness, she found Christ through a late-night live stream. For the first time, I wanted to be seen by God, not followed by people, she said. Now she runs a modest fashion brand that funds shelters for women recovering from sexual exploitation. Her detox was her redirection. And then there are those who resist the process, who hold on to their distractions like lifelines. One such person was Demas, a companion of Paul who ultimately abandoned his mission. In 2 Timothy 4:10, Paul writes, "For Demas, because he loved this world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica." Demas didn't fall because he was evil. He fell because he wouldn't let go of distraction. That is the risk of resisting detox. Comfort becomes a coffin. But that won't be your story, because you've already heard the whisper, that gentle prompting in the middle of temptation saying, "This isn't who you are anymore." You're starting to remember that purity isn't repression. Its power is under control. It's the ability to walk through fire and not be burned, because your soul is wet with living water. And yes, there will be moments when your body protests, when temptation claws at the edges of your progress. But remember, a craving is not a command. You are not a slave to your urges. You are a steward of your sacred energy. Proverbs 25:28 says, "Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control." But you are rebuilding those walls, brick by brick, boundary by boundary. You are no longer leaking power. You are retaining it. And soon, that stored power will manifest in clarity, purpose, revelation, and anointing. Just as the eagle must fast before molting its feathers, losing the old to prepare for the wind again, you too are shedding what no longer belongs. And when the storm clears, you won't just survive, you'll soar. Because this detox is not just about what's leaving, it's about what's coming. Clarity, confidence, calling, and communion with God that no pleasure could ever replace. 6. Heightened intuition and spiritual gifts activation. When God removes your desire for fleeting physical pleasure, chosen one, He isn't taking something from you. He's awakening something within you. You are not being deprived. You are being initiated into a realm of power few dare to enter. Because sexual energy is not meant to die. It is meant to evolve. And now, instead of moving outward, that sacred force is spiraling inward, unlocking your spiritual senses one layer at a time. Have you noticed it lately? How has your inner voice grown louder, clearer, more precise? How can you walk into a room and instantly feel what's unspoken? That's because your spiritual antenna is rising. The distractions have quieted. The static is gone. And now, divine frequencies that were once muffled are being broadcast directly into your soul. Psalm 32:8 says, "I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you." God is speaking, not just through sermons or sacred texts, but through patterns, numbers, dreams, timing, and unexpected encounters. As your physical urges lessen, your clairsenses are being stirred. Your clairvoyance, spiritual sight, clairsentience, spiritual feeling, and clairaudience, spiritual hearing. This is not fantasy, it's spiritual neurology, the activation of dormant faculties God placed in you before birth. Like seeds waiting for the right conditions, your gifts are now germinating, and they were never meant to bloom in the soil of chaos and distraction. The great prophet Daniel didn't sharpen his discernment through indulgence. He fasted, prayed, and set himself apart. Daniel 1:17 tells us, "To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning." And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. Your abstinence is producing the same soil of clarity, the same fire of vision. Nature itself mirrors this. When a volcano remains dormant for years, its pressure builds deep beneath the surface until, in a single eruption, new land is formed. That's what's happening in your soul. The old terrain of lust and distraction is being reshaped. The crust is breaking. And what emerges is revelation. Do you remember Jonah? His disobedience landed him in the belly of a fish, a place of darkness, silence, and surrender. But it was in that isolated chamber that his prophetic assignment was reactivated. Jonah 2. What if your current season of abstinence feels like a belly, dark, still, but is actually your birthing place? On the other side of this silence is your sharpness. You will start to discern spirits, read between the lines, dream with purpose, and sense divine timing. What once drained you now fuels you. What once tempted you now teaches you. This is energy alchemy, not merely resisting the lower, but transforming it into the higher. Take Marcus, a quiet violinist who lived most of his 20s, addicted to lust and validation. When his sex drive vanished, he panicked, but he began painting instead. Soon, melodies and visions poured from him. He now mentors autistic children through music therapy and says, "I used to chase pleasure to feel alive. Now I create from the spirit and give life to others." But beware, not all that is intuitive is divine. In Acts 16:16-18, Paul encountered a woman with a spirit of divination. She spoke with insight, but the source was unclean. Paul, in spiritual discernment, cast the spirit out. That's why your purity is essential. Intuition without sanctification can be hijacked. Your flesh must be crucified so your gifts can be consecrated. What God is awakening in you is not just perception, it is prophetic precision. He is teaching you how to feel what others ignore, to see what others miss, and to hear what heaven is whispering. You are now being entrusted with insight for others, not just for yourself. You will become an intercessor, a revealer, a vessel. Your dreams will start to carry warnings. Your words will start to break chains. Your silence will start to shift atmospheres. Romans 12:6 says, "We have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. Yours are beginning to rise, and they rise not through noise, but through stillness, surrender, and separation." This was never about repression. It was about reception, receiving divine instruction, supernatural sensitivity, and creative clarity. You are no longer just living, you are listening. And in that listening, you are being led. But chosen one, with the awakening of spiritual gifts comes another sacred responsibility: discernment. As your inner eyes open and your intuition sharpens, not everything you perceive will be pure. In fact, the more sensitive you become, the more clearly you'll detect not only light, but shadow. Just like a lighthouse must remain anchored during storms, you must root your gifts in God's truth, not ego. This is why the wilderness was always a training ground for prophets. Elijah heard God not in the fire, the earthquake, or the wind, but in the gentle whisper. 1 Kings 19:12. And you too are learning to recognize that divine whisper amid the noise of false revelations, emotional projections, and spiritual confusion. Have you noticed lately how certain people drain you, even without words? How can a space feel heavy, or a conversation can leave your spirit stirred in ways you can't explain? That's not paranoia, that's perception. Like migratory birds that navigate thousands of miles using the Earth's magnetic fields, your spirit is now being led by a divine compass invisible to the flesh. But here's the paradox. With great perception comes the temptation to perform. Some people, once awakened, begin chasing spiritual power more than spiritual purity. They seek to impress rather than intercede. They become prophets without presence, empty vessels echoing sound but not carrying substance. Judas Iscariot himself walked with Jesus, witnessed miracles, and carried spiritual authority, yet his heart was tethered to earthly gain. His betrayal in Luke 22:48 was not an act of ignorance, but of misaligned vision. This is why your season of abstinence is also a season of sanctification. It is preparing you to carry not just gifts, but glory, not for fame, but for function. God is refining your motives as much as He is sharpening your sight. You're learning that prophetic insight means nothing without compassion, and that discernment without humility becomes judgment. Take Naomi, a midwife in a remote village who started receiving vivid dreams after a season of celibacy and prayer. At first, she dismissed them, but when her visions began to reveal pregnancies and complications before they happened, she realized she was being entrusted with divine warnings. Today, she's saved over 200 lives through spirit-led intervention. God didn't make me psychic, she says. He made me a present enough to hear what others ignore. Romans 8:14 says, "For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God." That's what you're becoming. Not just someone who possesses gifts, but someone who is possessed by obedience. Someone whose gifts don't serve their ego, but their assignment. This is why you've been feeling the urge to withdraw, to be still, to fast from stimulation, not just physical, but digital and emotional. You are stepping into what the mystics called inner silence, the holy hush, where the soul becomes an instrument tuned to heaven's vibration. In that silence, clarity flows, creativity expands, and communion deepens. So if you've been wondering why you've become more sensitive lately, to people's intentions, to music, to atmospheres, it's because your vessel is being purified. You are being prepared not just to receive revelation, but to contain it without leakage. Hebrews 5:14 says, "But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil." You are in that training. Every moment of restraint, every nudge to pray instead of pursuing pleasure, every dream you write down, it is shaping you into a spiritual warrior cloaked in discernment, anchored in truth. You are not imagining your evolution, you are embodying it. The veil is thinning, the noise is fading, the gifts are rising, and very soon the world won't just hear your words, they'll feel your frequency. 7. You're entering a season of manifestation. Understand this deeply. Sexual energy is not separate from creative energy. They are one and the same. It is the energy of creation. Whether that creation is a child, a work of art, a business, or a transformed life. When God asks you to withhold that energy from meaningless pursuits, it is not a denial. It is an invitation into a higher form of creation. As you conserve that energy, it begins to build within you like a sacred reservoir. Suddenly, you find that your mind is clearer, your focus is sharper, and your willpower is stronger. You become a magnet for miracles. Your manifestations accelerate. You attract new opportunities, financial blessings, soul-aligned relationships, and spiritual breakthroughs. Why? Because you are no longer leaking your energy into dead-end pursuits that drain your spirit. Instead, you are directing that powerful life force into building the life that God intended for you. A life of abundance, peace, purpose, and divine fulfillment. This is your season, or you're entering a season of manifestation. Chosen one, have you felt it? The quiet inner shift. Like the trembling before rain, the pull in your spirit that tells you something is forming just beneath the surface. This is not your imagination. This is activation. You are no longer just existing. You are creating in alignment with divine will. And it all begins with energy. You must understand, sexual energy and creative energy are not separate forces. They are two rivers of the same divine source. In both biology and mysticism, this is known as life force energy, the sacred current that can either build nations or burn down destinies depending on where it flows. When God pulls you away from casual, carnal expression, He is not withholding pleasure, He is redirecting power. This is how flowers bloom, not by chasing bees, but by becoming so radiant and rooted that bees can't help but come. Your sex drive wasn't taken, it was transmuted. You are no longer leaking your essence into temporary thrills. You are retaining, concentrating, and redirecting that energy into the birthing of visions, ideas, legacies. Romans 8:19 declares, "For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed." Creation itself is groaning for the arrival of awakened ones like you, who are no longer governed by flesh, but fueled by divine intention. Have you noticed how your clarity is returning? How distractions that once lured you now seem dull and lifeless? This is what psychologists call libidinal redirection, the process of channeling previously misdirected sexual energy into high-functioning creativity and purpose. Nikola Tesla, one of the greatest inventors in modern history, was known for his celibacy. He once said, "I do not think you can name many great inventions that have been made by married men." His point was not to devalue love, but to highlight the creative potency of preserved energy. And you're entering that realm now, where ideas flow like rivers, where doors open before you knock, where your presence carries a charge that shifts atmospheres. You are becoming a living conduit for miracles because you are now in full custody of your energy. No longer scattered, no longer seduced by illusions, focused, ready. But beware the trap of misaligned manifestation. Remember Simon the sorcerer in Acts 8:18-21, who saw the apostles laying hands and offering the Holy Spirit and tried to buy that power. Peter rebuked him, saying, "Your heart is not right before God." Simon sought power without purification. You, however, are being purified first, so that what you manifest flows not from ego, but from alignment. Linda, a once overworked corporate consultant who went through a deep spiritual awakening after years of pouring herself into toxic relationships. When her sex drive disappeared, she thought something was wrong. But in that void, she began painting again, a passion she'd buried. Today, her intuitive art has been featured in galleries around the world, with pieces that bring people to tears. I stopped chasing men, she says, and started birthing beauty. Deuteronomy 28:12 says, "The Lord will open the heavens, the storehouse of his bounty, to bless all the work of your hands." This is what happens when your hands are no longer drained by distraction, but fueled by discipline. Your creativity becomes a ministry, your business becomes a blessing, your relationships become revelations. And yes, this will require patience. The seed doesn't sprout overnight. The caterpillar doesn't rush the cocoon. But inside of you, something has already shifted. The reservoir is being built. The pressure is rising. And when the moment comes, you will erupt on purpose. Ask yourself, what if your current emptiness is just the womb of your next explosion? What if God removed your craving for flesh so he could awaken your craving to build? Isaiah 43:19 reminds you, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" That new thing is not external. It's internal. It's the new blueprint God has carved into your spirit, waiting for you to obey long enough to construct it. This is not the season to waste energy. This is the season to focus on it, harness it, and birth it. Your energy now belongs to the vision, to the music, to the words, to the people waiting to be healed by your obedience. You are no longer just a vessel. You are a portal, and what God is birthing through you will outlive you. But manifestation is not magic. It is alignment in motion. You don't just receive it because you want to. You receive because you are ready. Your desires have been purified. Your intentions have been elevated. The delay you once felt was never denial. It was divine incubation. Think of the bamboo tree. For 5 years after it is planted, nothing appears above ground. 5 long years of stillness, silence, and invisible rooting. But in the 5th year, it grows up to 90 feet in just 6 weeks. Did it grow in 6 weeks? No, it grew the entire time, just underground. You are in that bamboo phase. The silence wasn't death, it was deep. James 1:4 says, "Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Maturity is not measured by how fast you move, but by how deeply you prepare. God is not interested in shallow success. He is building something in you that cannot be uprooted by storms, opinions, or applause. And chosen one, the energy you now hold is magnetic, but sacred. You may start noticing people being drawn to you, asking for guidance, even without you saying much. That's because your energy speaks louder than your words. This is the essence of what mystics and quantum theorists alike refer to as resonance. The vibration you emit naturally attracts what is in harmony with it. But with new power comes new tests. Not every opportunity is divine. Not every open door is from heaven. The devil can disguise distraction as destiny. Remember Balaam, the prophet who was offered riches to curse God's people. Numbers 22:12 through 22. He had the gift, but his heart drifted. God had to send a talking donkey to stop him. Why? Because misdirected power is destructive, and you are being taught to listen even when the voice sounds strange. Your manifestation will not always look glamorous. It may start in silence, in small ideas, in humble beginnings. Zechariah 4:10 says, "Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin." Every moment you resist temptation, you plant a seed. Every time you choose focus over fantasy, you water it. And very soon, a harvest no man can claim credit for will rise. Khalid, a former nightclub DJ in Amsterdam, was known for wild parties and casual flings, but after a spiritual encounter during a panic attack, his urges began to vanish. Instead of seeking sex or status, he started writing music that healed anxiety. His first EP, recorded in his bedroom, went viral for its calming frequencies. "I stopped chasing the high," he said. "Now I can channel it." You too are learning to channel. That's the difference between those who fantasize and those who manifest. Fantasy is passive. Manifestation is participation with heaven. You are being invited to co-create with God, to write the book, launch the business, speak the word, start the movement, not from ambition, but from alignment. Proverbs 16:3 says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans." That's what's happening now. God is establishing not just dreams, but blueprints, not just visions, but divine instructions. And the energy you once wasted in pursuit of the temporary is now becoming the fuel for the eternal. So, what are you birthing in this season? What sacred idea has been knocking on the door of your spirit, waiting for your obedience to open? You are no longer waiting on God. God is waiting on you. And when you step forward in obedience, you will see what few ever experience, a life where miracles feel normal. Because when the vessel is pure, the oil flows freely. And when the oil flows, nothing can stop the manifestation. 8. You were chosen to break the chain. Chosen one, you may have thought your lack of desire was about you, your body, your season, your situation. But in truth, you are carrying the weight of generations. The silence in your flesh is not weakness in its distance is satirisias. Maisidandi, Maitsatam, Maltosi, Antarpon, Anti, Antartwan, Alsasosti, Sieve, Osidauntistio, Dalaverti, my difference echoing through your bloodline. Many of you were born into families entangled in sexual sin, cycles of adultery, secret addictions, shameful obsessions, and broken marriages masked by religion and silence. These aren't random patterns. These are ancestral strongholds. Spiritual and psychological loops passed down like invisible DNA, shaping behaviors before you were old enough to choose. But you were not born to repeat. You were born to redeem. Have you ever wondered why certain temptations hit you harder than others? Why do you feel resistance in your body when it comes to romantic intimacy, even when everything should feel right? It's not dysfunctional. It's a disruption. You are the divine interruption in a lineage that has bled silently for too long. Exodus 25 reveals, "I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation." This may sound harsh, but it's a warning about the spiritual residue that clings to bloodlines when sin is left unrepented and unhealed. You are being raised up as the intercessor who breaks this residue with holy resistance. It is no coincidence that God is silencing your sexual urges now. He's cutting the cord. The same way a gardener prunes a diseased branch so the whole tree can heal, He is pruning your lineage through you. It hurts, but it's holy. What you resist today will bless the children you haven't even birthed yet. Galatians 5:1 says, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free." Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. That's what these patterns are: slavery, spiritual bondage, masquerading as normal. But you have been called to be the first to abstain, to confront, to speak, to heal, to build a new legacy rooted in righteousness. Take Leona, a trauma counselor from Louisiana. She grew up watching every woman in her family suffer through abusive relationships and fatherless homes. When her sex drive mysteriously vanished in her 30s, She thought something was wrong, but instead of chasing answers through doctors, she sought God. That's when she realized he wasn't punishing her, he was positioning her. She later founded a faith-based program for young girls, breaking generational cycles through mentorship and prayer. God removed the fire, she says, so I could light torches in others. But not all choose to walk the narrow path. Jezebel, the queen of Israel, was infamous for her seductive manipulation and spiritual corruption. Though she held earthly power, her legacy was one of destruction. In 2 Kings 9:22, Jehu says, "How can there be peace, as long as the harlotries and sorceries of your mother Jezebel are so many?" Jezebel did not just fall to sin, she institutionalized it. She normalized sexual immorality, idol worship and spiritual rebellion, cursing her bloodline with a legacy of chaos. You, chosen one, are the opposite of Jezebel, not one who seduces others into destruction, but one who stands alone to end the seduction. This is the psychology of intergenerational trauma, where inherited patterns become internalized behaviors. You are not just healing a habit, you are rewiring spiritual and emotional circuits laid long before your birth. Your celibacy is not a restriction, it is recalibration. And nature confirms this. A river that flows unchecked for centuries carves deep canyons into the land. But when redirected, it can irrigate deserts and bring new life to barren ground. That's what's happening through you. You are redirecting the flood. Isaiah 58:12 promises, "You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings." You are restoring foundations that were cracked before your name was spoken. Every time you say no to lust, you are saying yes to future generations who will walk free. So if you've wondered why your body feels numb or uninterested, it's not failure, it's the focus. God is using your abstinence as a spiritual firewall, blocking access to the enemy's oldest trap, the one that captured your mother, and her mother, and her mother's mother. This is how bloodlines are rewritten, not in noise, but in quiet revolutions of the soul. Chosen one, when you said yes to the call, you weren't just saying yes for yourself. You were saying yes for every soul chained before you and every soul coming after you. Your eyes are shaking centuries of silence. It's rewriting the spiritual architecture of your bloodline. Have you ever looked around your family tree and seen the same shadows repeating? The same emotional wounds, the same betrayals, the same premature deaths, the same unhealthy relationships that always seem to collapse just when love starts to bloom. That's not a coincidence. That's a karmic pattern, a spiritual loop programmed into the soul of your lineage, reinforced by culture, normalized by pain, and passed down like a broken inheritance. And just like a tree infected at the root, the fruit suffers until someone has the courage to dig deep enough to purify the soil. That someone is you. The Apostle Paul warns in Ephesians 4:27, "Do not give the devil a foothold. Many before you gave him exactly that, a foothold through unchecked lust, emotional manipulation, and soul ties. But you're closing the door. You're doing what they couldn't do, and the enemy knows it. That's why your battle is harder. This is more than deliverance. It's intercessory engineering, where your obedience now becomes the blueprint of freedom for those who are coming. You are not just praying for freedom, you are becoming the path. And yes, Jezebel still whispers. The spirit of seduction, of manipulation, of spiritual compromise still creeps in through culture, entertainment, even through wounded lovers. But now your discernment has sharpened. You can spot the trap before it forms. That is evidence the curse is breaking. Remember the fig tree Jesus cursed in Mark 11:14. It looked fruitful from afar, but bore no real fruit. That's what generational sin does. It offers promise, but delivers barrenness. Jesus cursed it not out of anger, but to teach the disciples a truth. Appearances are not always alignment. You are no longer fooled by leaves. You are becoming a fruit bearer, rooted in divine truth. Consider the emotional legacy you're creating. When a chosen one breaks a sexual soul tie, they're not just resisting a moment, they're removing a spiritual parasite. That's how trauma ends. That's how new patterns begin. Psychology calls this epigenetic healing, when someone's new behaviors alter how certain genes express themselves in future generations. God has been doing this long before science had a name for it. In the same way, wildfires can destroy an entire forest, yet also trigger certain seeds to germinate, seeds that only break open in heat. Your pain has activated something ancient and holy within you. You are the seed, awakened by fire. You're not just breaking curses, you're establishing covenants. A covenant of purity, a covenant of discernment, a covenant of divine intimacy. What once entered your bloodline through secrecy is now being purged through sacred transparency. You may not have a physical scar to show for what you're fighting, but the heavens know your name. The angels assigned to your bloodline are rejoicing because for the first time in generations, the darkness met resistance and it backed down. So hold your ground, fast, pray, stay alert, and when the moment of weakness comes, and it will, remember, you are not just resisting for yourself, you are rebuilding for the children you will raise, the nieces and nephews watching you, the people you've never met who will walk freer because you stayed consecrated. But before you walk away from this moment, ask yourself this: if not you, then who? And if not now, then how many more generations must suffer before someone finally chooses to break the chain? The graveyards of your ancestry may be filled with broken covenants, but your altar will overflow with generational restoration. 9. You are being prepared for a sacred purpose. Chosen one, the silence in your body is not the absence of life. It is the sound of heaven preparing to speak. You are not being neglected. You are being refined. You are not being denied. You are being repositioned. There comes a point in every divine assignment where God begins to consecrate you, to set you apart, not because you're better, but because your purpose demands it. And in that holy separation, your desires begin to change. What once thrilled you now leaves you numb. What once pulled you now repels you. That is not confusion. It is a spiritual elevation. Your body is entering divine stillness because your mission is sacred. You are not called to ordinary love, ordinary pleasure, or ordinary legacy. You are being prepared to carry the weight of glory. And glory cannot dwell in vessels that are still chained to distraction. Just as gold must pass through fire to be purified, you are passing through the fire of abstinence, clarity, and transformation. Your lower self, the part driven by appetite and impulse, is being stripped away, not because it was evil, but because it cannot go where you're going. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That is what this process is. A neurological reset, a divine neuroplasticity that reconditions how your soul responds to the body. You are being rewired for purpose, not pleasure. God often isolates those he intends to elevate. Moses was exiled to the wilderness before leading a nation. Esther fasted in secret before saving her people. Even Jesus spent 40 days in the desert in silence and hunger before stepping into public ministry. The wilderness was never the end. It was the womb, the place where destiny matures in darkness. Think of the eagle. When it's time to renew, it flies to a high cliff, plucks out its old feathers, and breaks its own beak against the rocks. It's painful, but it's necessary, because only in death of the old can the new emerge. That's where you are. Your beak is breaking, your feathers are falling, but soon you will soar. You might wonder, why now? Why this loneliness, this disinterest, this season of stillness? Could it be because your next chapter requires more spiritual stamina than your flesh can carry? God is teaching you how to hold power without pride, to lead without lust, to touch souls without being entangled in soul ties. This is spiritual sterilization, not of your identity, but of your internal clutter. And let's be clear, your sex drive will return, but not in the way it once roared for validation, escape, or control. When it returns, it will burn with intention. It will align with your assignment. It will be drawn only to what fuels your mission, not what feeds your ego. Isaiah 48:10 says, "See, I have refined you, though not as silver. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction." You are being refined, but unlike the world, you are not being emptied. You are being filled with holy precision. Take Andre, a 36-year-old sculptor from Portugal. After battling a decade of compulsive sexual addiction, his desires simply vanished one night during prayer. For 2 years, he thought he was broken. But in those 2 years, he birthed his most profound work, a sculpture titled Covenant, which later traveled through churches across Europe. God didn't steal my drive, he says. He sanctified it. But contrast this with Herod Antipas, the ruler who let his lust destroy his legacy. In Mark 6, he is seduced by a dance, manipulated into executing John the Baptist, silencing the voice of conviction in his life. He let a moment of arousal override eternal purpose. That is the danger when power lacks purity. But you, chosen one, are being fortified to never let pleasure kill your prophecy. You are being turned into a vessel that holds weight, not leaks it, into a spirit that moves nations, not just hearts, into a soul that radiates divine fire, not carnal smoke. 1 Peter 5:10 promises, "After you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace will himself restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast." So hold on. The season of silence is sacred. The quiet is not punishment, it's preparation. The stillness in your body is the stage being cleared for glory to enter. This isn't the death of your desire, it's the divine rebirth of your purpose. Chosen one, if you've made it this far, you already know. This wasn't just information, this was confirmation. You weren't crazy for feeling what you've been feeling. You weren't weak for wondering why your body has shifted, your desires have quieted, your soul has become louder. No, you were being called higher. You were being purified, repositioned, recalibrated for something that this world could never understand. And now you understand it too. What once felt like emptiness was really sacred preparation. What looked like suppression was really protection. God didn't take your sex drive to punish you. He did it to preserve you, because there's a mantle on your life, a purpose on your path, a fire in your future. And now that your energy is no longer scattered, it's about to set the world on fire. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are in divine alignment. So if this message touched your soul, if even one line echoed something you've been carrying quietly, don't keep that shift to yourself. Type 777 in the comments right now. Let that be your public declaration. I am chosen. I am aligned. I am ready. Because when you speak it, heaven responds. When you claim it, the frequency shifts. 777 is the divine number of completion, spiritual awakening, and heavenly fulfillment. It is the signature of God's perfect timing in your life. And family, if you haven't already, take one sacred step further. Subscribe to the Grateful to God channel. This is more than a platform. It's a sanctuary for awakened souls like you. Hit that like button so this message reaches another chosen one who's been quietly battling what you just overcame. Share it with someone who's been wondering why they've changed. You could be the voice that explains what no one else could. And to every single one of you who's ever supported this channel, whether you've given through super thanks, offered a word of encouragement, or simply watched in silence, thank you. Your energy is felt. Your presence is honored. Your journey matters here. Now go forward, chosen one. Walk in your light. Guard your energy. And trust that God has not forgotten you. He has been forming you. You are not who you were. You are becoming who you were always meant to be. Stay rooted in truth. Stay covered in grace. And until next time, stay blessed, stay protected, and keep rising. Amen.